So, RimWorld Odyssey has been out for just over a month now, and I think we've all had enough time to settle in and experience it, either by playing it for ourselves, or by watching your favorite YouTuber play it. Today, I'll be discussing my experience with the latest DLC and what I absolutely adored about it. I'll also be summarizing, sorta, my initial playthrough of it, as that is how I first experienced it. Just kind of a disclaimer though, for transparency's sake, in case you're not aware, Ludion did give me early access to the DLC right before it actually launched and was able to be purchased, so you might think I'm a shill who's just lying and glazing the DLC because Ludion gave it to me for free. I can assure you that's not the case, but obviously you'll just have to take my word for it. So, to begin, for my very first colony, as some of you may know, I began with the Grav ship scenario. Basically, I get my own ship and a small crew of 3 with some Grav light panels scattered all around the orbital platform that we very briefly called home. Almost immediately, though, we had to start packing up to skedaddle since we were being targeted by the mechhive, a new super intelligent control hub of all the mechanoids. Starting with the Grav ship means that you'll have to get used to these constant mechanoid barrages because they won't end until you end the hive itself. Needless to say, easier said than done. I said it anyways. Just like that though, we're already discussing the new endgame that's added with this DLC, and similar to the Anomaly DLC, there's quite a bit of work involved in getting there. So, of course, the mechanoids would land on the platform coming to kill us, and we would get in the ship and get the hell out of there. Leaving the orbital platform felt kinda sudden, as I'd really hoped to kinda get to enjoy it a bit more, but there's plenty more opportunities in the very near future. I ended up landing planet side in between a river delta, the winding waters and what have you, and it looked really good. It was absolutely beautiful. Immediately getting to experience what it was like to kinda sorta crash the Grav ship, because apparently this works on a similar ritual-like thing to ideology, and also, of course, the new biomes and adjustments that have been made to them. I will say about that, I wasn't really expecting the ship's landing and takeoff and stuff to work in a similar fashion to how ideology rituals work, but honestly, I think it's a really good idea. So anyhow though, we run away from the mechanoids and set up a temporary base here. We set up a few temporary bases everywhere, though I must say that starting with gravlight panels and other things that allow you to expand the ship in this scenario is just really great, because nowhere really feels like home except for your Grav ship, which is just a cool change to RimWorld. Even more proof of this, and something I loved, is that you can actually name your Grav ships too. After a while though, we get our very first quest about where to find more Grav tech, so we start tracking down our first Grav core. Grav cores are a new item that allow you to build specific items for your ship once you have the appropriate research, of course. Many such items helping you either power your ship and colony, or extend the build limit of your Grav ship, and many other things. Our first quest for the Grav cores was the underground stockpile. Before we got there though, we had to land a little bit farther away from it in a Scarland city, basically the ancient destroyed cities, because the Grav ship's range was pretty minimal to start off with. We lived in this area for a very brief period of time, and it was actually my first DLC biome that I had ever encountered, unless you count a river delta, which I guess you kinda can, but the Scarlands were really cool looking, very war-torn and very ancient, so I really like that. A lot of the animals here were diseased with Scaria, which is RimWorld's version of rabies. Not all of them though, as we tamed a bog dog, or bog hound I believe it's called. I forgot because I ended up leaving it behind. He was my first DLC tame, but I didn't even get to name him before I completely forgot about him at some point. I don't even know when it was. Moving on. Eventually though, we would fly off to the ancient stockpile, which in my case just so happened to also be in the Scarlands, which was a really nice touch for my first time because I associate the experience with that, and having these bunkers in an ancient city just makes sense to me, but they can spawn in any type of biome from what I understand. We would encounter 3 separate hatches, each of which leading to an individual underground bunker. One out of these 3 would contain the quest items that we're looking for, a great way to start off the required quest for this DLC, by the way. Now, even though the first two that we explored didn't have the grav tech that we needed, there were other useful items. Each bunker normally contains large pallets of survival meals, medicine, or a combination of both, which is cool because you can focus more on exploring and flying instead of growing food and herbal medicine for a bit. However, they also contain some other valuable things like the Archean seed, which basically sprouts a tree that can terraform anything. Great for any asteroid bases. I wonder if anyone built one. Obviously, though, these bunkers, as well as other ancient structures that you'll encounter throughout the DLC, not only do they have some pretty great stuff that you're going to want to get your hands on, but they're also very dangerous, being protected by turrets and different types of drones. Once finding your grav core, you'll also find some grav light panels alongside it. Also incredibly useful since your first core is usually used on an extender for the ship, and the panels are used to build onto the foundation of the ship itself. Now, after the first quest, there doesn't really seem to be a strict order in which the remaining grav cores quests can fall in, although I'm basing this on my experience in only 2 RimWorld Odyssey series, so I'm probably wrong, one of which the series I barely even focused on the grav ship. Either way though, you'll get the remaining quests in some order, and this is something else that I really love about Odyssey. These quests for the DLC to collect the grav cores keep it fresh for the most part. One day you're scavenging underground bunkers in the ruins of a collapsed metropolitan. 2 days later, you're hacking mechanoid relays in a huge canyon to force a satellite to crash, or you're digging through a giant glacier in search of an ancient runaway terraformer. All in the name of grav cores. But you know what? You would be forgiven for forgetting about the grav cores entirely, as these regions and ancient places all feel very unique, each of which having different resources and items to aid you in your ultimate mission of destroying the mechhive. Now, I will say, after going through enough of these ancient facilities, the combination of drone traps, sentries, and turrets can feel a little bit repetitive, but if you're exploring exclusively the quest locations instead of also going to ancient landmarks, which were also added with the DLC, you'll barely notice, to be honest. Something else incredibly cool added was, of course, the addition of orbital objects and the ability to land on said objects with the possibility of turning them into a home of our own, i.e. asteroids, for example. I personally founded a base on an asteroid, as I kinda hinted at earlier, and had planned on using it as a forward operating base to take on the mechanoid invasion and the hive. However, the mechanoids ended up detecting me here and started sending gigantic raids, and I do mean gigantic, at which point I was left with no other choice but to flee. This, again, was super fun and awesome. RimWorld might be the only game where I love to see myself lose because it makes for a much better story, and it makes my colonist redemption arc that much sweeter. You know, in cases like this one where we don't all get slaughtered before escaping. This does, however, bring me to something I dislike in Odyssey. I know, right, me, the professional Odyssey glazer. Hard to believe, huh? But it's the fact that you must build a grav anchor in the area or region before flying off in your ship. Otherwise, you completely lose that area forever. Personally, I think it's kinda sorta makes sense for asteroids. Not really, though. Maybe the anchor holds it in place and keeps your thrust from kinda throwing it out of orbit. But it definitely does not make sense for regions of the planet. There's no way in hell my tiny cube starter ship could destroy a full-on city I build first and foremost just by flying into the air. Maybe if you put all your focus into your grav ship and turned it into a giant starship and you've built a tent village for all your people to live in, that kind of makes sense. It's going to blow them away and the engines are going to make a great big crater, I guess. But I don't know, I feel like it should really take that kind of thing into account. The amount of engines, how large they are, stuff like that. I guess I think a useful, use for the grav anchor would make sense in areas like the ancient stockpile where you already can't settle a colony for whatever reason. That way you can return anytime you like. To be fair though, this all could just be achieved by allowing you to settle that area instead, but I digress. Anyway though, once you've tucked tail and abandoned your asteroid base that you worked really hard on, like I have, you'll need to focus on finding more grav cores so that you can stop the robotic menace once and for all before finally returning. Now, while you're in between these vital quests to your ultimate goal, you can do a plethora of things, like taming a boghound, like I did, that you'll forget about and abandon. Maybe I'm just projecting onto you guys. Or perhaps a crow, which I also did, or a fancy colorful colorful bird, which, wait a minute, I did that too. You know what? You should go out and tame your own animals. There's quite the catalog to choose from since Odyssey adds over 40 new animals. Something also I'm a really big fan of. I love anything that adds new animals and details and stuff. I was a big fan of Ideology since it added so many little details that you can have to your colony, and I think that having so many different animals also adds a lot of little details to the environments of the planets and stuff that we're all starting on, so that's why. But perhaps you don't feel like taming critters though? Well, luckily for you, you'll also be able to get quests from traders and other factions in general to hunt down fugitives at ancient space stations. Perhaps you'd prefer to venture out onto an ancient satellite instead, based on your own leadership, destroying its defenses and taking its riches and resources for yourself to build onto that Grav ship some more. Well, Odyssey, once again, has you covered, and these are also some things that I did and really had fun doing. In particular, I really liked hunting down the bounty targets. I think that that is a really cool quest option. I'm a huge fan of the simple warrants mod on the workshop, so, you know, this is right up my alley. But even with all these new things to do, don't get caught up in the fun too much now. You still have a mission to defeat the mechhive, and you're gonna need a lot of research and a lot of resources to build useful additions to your ship, like a signal jammer. This is a device that scrambles mechanoid and human systems that can lock onto your ship, allowing the interested party to blast you into a fine mist of space debris before you're able to land at their floating platform in the vacuum. You see, most of these active platforms, like the mechhive one, actually have these gigantic orbital cannons and laser beams that could easily blast you into a few pieces, and so you can't even visit these places without the jammer, meaning you can't complete your main quest without it. Go figure. This is yet another special little addition that I find interesting. I've always found it odd in RimWorld that other factions can't detect you when you're headed to their base to give them a good beating, like the Empire, for example. Surely they would have shuttles flying everywhere and would be keeping an eye on you, and maybe some other factions. So the fact that Odyssey adds that layer to orbital bases and destinations is a nice cherry on top of these new facilities. It only makes sense your ship would be giving off some type of radio waves or frequencies that can be detected, and that you would need to jam their systems to get the jump on them. Now, along with the jammer, there's also the Orbital Scanner, which is a device with a satellite dish atop it that, given enough time, can locate signals of its own and pinpoint those signals to their respective locations, such as more ancient relay stations, orbital satellites, mechanoid facilities, so on and so forth, and ultimately the mechhive. Now, I do realize I've been yammering about these machines and they might not sound super useful, but again, as I said a moment ago, to reiterate, they are very crucial must-haves, as they're the only way you can really end up getting to the mechhive, which again is how you beat the game. Before you do that though, you'll almost definitely come into contact with the insect hive queen while searching for another Grav core. Underground in a massive fleshy cave-like hive, you'll fend off multiple waves of gigantic killer bugs up until you locate the queen in her nest, who also just so happens to have that Grav core you're looking for. You can kill her and eat her like I did, or perhaps capture her to be milked with the help of mods. Up to you, you disgusting little freak. The underground hive was very similar to the pit gate from RimWorld Anomaly, which is great because I love the design of that, and fighting off insectoids is much more RimWorld than Flesh Beast. Though, given your surroundings and the weakness to fire with both of the types of creatures, one can't help but draw parallels. Now, the added benefit of this cave system, though, is that it will not collapse once she's been beaten, her being the queen, of course. Side note, I bet one of these caves would make for an awesome underground base. Eventually though, after all of these things, you will finally locate the mechhive. And I really do mean finally, because it's a very long journey. Don't get me wrong, the journey is insanely fun and epic. I just mean that the DLC has so much to offer, it takes quite a while before you finally reach the end, even if that's all you're focused on. And even then, there's still plenty more to do. Now then, the fight against the hive is pretty incredible, and you really do have to be ready for the worst, because there's a good chance, if you aren't overly prepared, you'll lose your entire ship full of colonists. might be best to keep an evac shuttle on standby. You have the core of the entire hive and all of the mechanoids, all of them, in the center of the orbital platforms, but it's completely invulnerable until you destroy 3 stabilizers. Notice I specifically said destroy, and not hack or destroy, as some of these can be hacked. That's because, unlike most of the mechanoid-related areas so far, you cannot hack these stabilizers at all, and they must be destroyed. But you might say, well, who cares? Why does that matter? Well, that's an issue, because when these stabilizers are hacked, there's no violent response from the hive, no defensive response, maybe a better terminology. But when they're destroyed, the hive will send out a squad of murderous machines to deal with you. So basically, you have to fight through a robotic hell just to locate the stabilizers, and once you finally destroy one of them, you now have to fight to the death just for the privilege of maybe being able to locate the next one. Incredibly difficult and painful, but also highly entertaining and exciting. Just be as prepared as you can, overly prepared, as we mentioned a moment ago, because you are most definitely at least going to lose 1 or 2 people your first time. Maybe not, but most likely. Now, personally, I recommend souping up your Grav ship with huge turrets like uranium slug and autocannons, because they can help take on the gigantic hordes of mechanoids that are coming right for you, and if you need to, you can retreat there and heal and eat, or just regroup before trying to locate the next stabilizer. Also, stock up on EMP launchers and grenades. They're going to be your best friend given how many mechs you're going to be facing throughout this DLC. Realistically, those are a wise investment to make very early on. I didn't think to do that, so I done them later, learned from my mistakes. Once it's finally over though, you've destroyed all 3 stabilizers and you can now destroy the hive's core. Or you can scavenge it for parts. Destroying it shuts down all the mechanoids controlled by the hive permanently. No, like seriously, nothing can bring them back online as far as I'm aware. A cool detail here, they are indeed offline. To scrap them for parts, you'll have to kill them first, and if you hover over them, it'll show that they're actually unconscious and not dead. Now, of course, since I didn't go with the second option of taking the parts from the core, I don't have first-hand knowledge of what happens. But, from what I understand, you will acquire a Cerebrix node that a colonist can equip, allowing them to summon mechanoids to their aid on a whim. However, it seems you'll also have to continue dealing with mechanoid raids if you don't destroy the core. I'm gonna level with you though. Personally, I think destroying and disabling a key mega faction in the game that has been a constant in RimWorld since its conception is a major power move, and the better choice, just my opinion. To each their own, of course. Either way, both endings are pretty incredible though, and after doing all this, you'll still have almost an endless supply of ancient landmarks, orbital bases, and new unique biomes to explore, not to mention the countless unique weapons and animals and things like that. Before I give you my final opinion on the DLC, in case you're curious as to what I did after beating this DLC, and ultimately beating the game here I suppose with the ending, I went all the way back to my asteroid base, cleared out all the unconscious mechanoids, and completely rebuilt it. A nice stronghold in the stars. So what would I personally give RimWorld Odyssey? I would say a solid 9 out of 10. Everything is amazing. Genuinely, it's all so fun, and it's a great, fresh DLC to the game. I genuinely, I'd use the word genuinely too much. I think that Odyssey is exactly what RimWorld needed. Now, Anomaly, don't get me wrong, was super fun and stuff, but there wasn't a lot of hype around it. I feared that RimWorld may have eventually started to fall off. But with Odyssey and the renewed excitement from everyone, the community, and so many new people coming in to play it, I think the numbers were showing that there's like a record amount of people playing RimWorld. It's very impressive, and I think everyone shares the opinion, it's not much of a hot take, that Odyssey is by far the greatest DLC thus far to be released, even beating Biotech, which I know many of you love. And unlike its predecessor RimWorld Anomaly, Odyssey feels authentically RimWorld down to its core. The style, the quests, the big bad being mechanoids, everything fits the base game perfectly as an expansion of what makes core RimWorld such a blast. Now, I do wish, as I mentioned, the grav anchors weren't needed or they were just done differently, and I also wish that animal trainings allowed you to control the animals, like by drafting them and some other teeny tiny tweaks here and there, but other than that type of stuff, I really do think it's awesome. It's amazing. I would almost say perfect, at least in terms of an expansion for the game. Now, call me a shill if you must, but I genuinely would go as far as to say that this is my new favorite RimWorld DLC. I mean, it's hard for it not to be, right? They promised a lot and they delivered on everything. It just adds so many things, big and small, many details and specific things such as the quest and grav cores, to less specific things that are in the same vein, like landmarks. Things like that added by the DLC are so versatile. They're perfect for any playthrough to be explored, even if you don't care about the grav ship. Dynamic weathers are amazing. The fact that you settle in areas where biomes meet now, causing them to be a blend of the two biomes, it's all just incredible. I absolutely love it, and I would highly recommend getting it for yourself. Of course, though, if you maybe like to see someone do a playthrough of it first before deciding, I do have two of them, being the one that I've discussed in this video, which is almost completely vanilla, and another one, which is pretty heavily modded, if you'd like to check those out, of course. But I would absolutely love to hear from you guys. What did you like about Odyssey? Did you think it was great? Did you love it? Did you think it was just alright? Did you not really like it at all? It's meh, you hated it? And if so, what did you like? What did you hate? All that great stuff. Or just let me know what you've done that's cool in Odyssey so far. What kind of colonies have you been building? What kind of mods have you been using? I can't wait to hear all about it. But as always, my friends, I love you, and I will see you next time.